Daf Yomi, Tractate Bava Batra, page 88a, top of the page. Page Peches, Amid Aleph, top of the page with a Kagon Shinatla, Lamod Ba Uchidaraba de Amaraba Hekisha Nischayab Ba. The Mishnah is referring to a case where the storekeeper took the jug from the child in order to measure with it for him, and because he took it in his hands, he is liable in the event of an accident in accordance with the opinion of Rabbah. As Rabbah says, with regard to the obligation to return lost animals, even in a case where the finder is exempt from caring for the animal and returning it to its owner, for example, if he is an elderly person or it is beneath his dignity, he's a rabbi, let's say, it's beneath his dignity, if he struck the animal in order to lead it, and then he becomes obligated to return it. Likewise, the rabbis here maintain that the storekeeper's action renders him liable for the jug. Amor de Amaraba Balechaim de Ankitin hu Nigrabraita. Ki hai gabna miyama. The Gemara asks, you can say that Rabbah says his statement with regard to animals, as the finder taught them to take steps away, meaning that he worsened the situation as he causes them to stray even further from their owner. Nevertheless, in a case like this, where the storekeeper took the jug from the child, did Rabbah say that the storekeeper is liable? The storekeeper's action does not make it any more likely that the jug will break. Ela amar Rava. Rather, Rava said, Ani va'ari shebachabura targemnuha. Here's another one of these unusual things. They appear once in a while. Rava said, I and the lion of the group. I and the lion of the group, and he's referring to Rabbi Zera. So Rava said, I and the lion of the group explained it. Ani va'arish bechabura targiminoa umanu Rabbi Zera. And who is this great sage refers to as lion? Is Rabbi Zera. Hachumayaskina kagon shinat lamod ba'alacherim. Just a side point. An ongoing quandary of mine is that every now and then you'll find a very unusual expression like this one, I and the lion, and it seems to me that there's more than just the surface. Like there's probably patterns and there's some intentionality behind it. It could even be a code, but I haven't cracked the code yet. But at any rate, it is Rabbi Zera, and the explanation is as follows. Here we are dealing with a case where the storekeeper took the jug from the child in order to measure it with it for others without the knowledge of the father. Shoel Shalomi Das Kamifliki Mar Savar Shol Havi Mar Savar Gazon Havi. And the rabbis and the Rabbi Yehuda disagree with regard to a borrower who takes an item without the owner's knowledge. One sage, Rabbi Yehuda, holds that the storekeeper is considered like any other borrower, and once he returns the jug to the child, he is no longer responsible for it. And one sage, the rabbis, holds that someone who borrows without the owner's knowledge is a robber and is obligated to return the item to its owner. Therefore, the storekeeper must pay for the jug that the child broke before it reached the father. Gufa. The Gemara returns to the matter itself. Gufa, the matter itself. Amar Shmuel, hanotok limin ha'uman libakro v'denas biyado chayv v'hanimili hu dekatsi demei. The Gemara returns to the matter itself. Shmuel says with regard to one who takes a vessel from a craftsman in order to examine it, and an accident occurred while it was in his possession and it broke, he is liable to pay restitution for the vessel. The Gemara explains, And this statement applies only in a case where the monetary value of the vessel is fixed, because he examines the vessel merely to ensure that there is nothing wrong with it, and it is assumed that if he finds no defect, he will buy it. Ahu Gavra de al Lebetabcha. The Gemara relates, there was a certain man who entered a butcher shop and lifted a thigh of meat to examine it. Ahu Gavra de al Lebetabcha agabe atma de bisra. While he was lifting it, behade agba ata parasha mirmal mine asala kamed Rav Yemar chayave l'shlom edeme behane mile dehu dekatzedeme. So the story was of a certain man who entered a butcher shop and lifted a thigh of meat to examine it. While he was lifting it, a horseman came and seized it from him. The buyer came before Vemar, who deemed him liable to pay its monetary value to the seller because it was seized from him after he had lifted it. The Gemara again notes, and this matter, meaning the halacha, applies only in a place where the monetary value of the item is fixed, and therefore lifting it is equivalent to finalizing the sale. Hahu Gavra is a similar incident where there was a certain man, Daisi Ka'ari Lefum Nahara. Asukuli Alma Shakul Krakra Amalahu Arehem Mukdashin Lashamahi. The Gemara relates a similar incident. There was a certain man who brought pumpkins to the city of Pum Nahara. Everyone came and took a pumpkin with the intention of buying it, but had yet to pay for it. The seller was angry, and since he did not know from whom to demand payment, he said to them, "The pumpkins are hereby consecrated to heaven." So the comment of Gahana, Amar lahu, Ein adam makdish davar she'eno shelo. V'han mili hu dekaytzi minayu. Aval lo kaytzi demayu. Bereshus marayu dekaymi v'shabarekdish. They came before Kahana to inquire about the halachic status of the pumpkins. Karai are pumpkins. Karai. Lepum Nahara. They came before Afghana to inquire about the halachic status of the pumpkins. Afghana said to them, "This statement has no effect. A person cannot consecrate an item that is not his. And since the buyers had lifted the pumpkins, they no longer belong to the seller." Once again, the Gemara points out, and this matter, meaning the halach, applies only in a place where the item's monetary value is fixed, and therefore lifting it is akin to finalizing the sale. But if the item's monetary value is not fixed, it remains in the jurisdiction of its owner, and the seller did well, meaning was successful in that he consecrated it. Okay. Tanu Rabbanan. הלוקח ירק מן השוק ובירר והניח אפילו כל יום כולו לא קנה ולא נתחייב במעשר. That sages taught in the case of one who wishes to buy vegetables from the market and the seller is an am ha'aretz, one who is unreliable with regard to tithes, in which case the buyer is required to separate tithes after his purchase. And he selected superior quality vegetables from inferior quality vegetables and placed them to the side as he was considering purchasing them. Even if he did this all day, if he does not decide to buy the vegetables, he does not acquire them and does not become obligated in separating tithes. גם הבליבו לקנוסו, קונו נסחיה במעשר, לחזירו אי אפשר שכבר נסחיה במעשר, ולעשרו אי אפשר שכבר מפחיתן בדמים Haketzad ma'asro v'noten lo demei ma'aser. If he had determined to buy the vegetables he selected, he acquires them and becomes obligated in separating tithes. In such a case, it is not possible for him to decide to not buy the vegetables and to return them to the seller in their present state, as they have already became obligated in tithes. And likewise, it is not possible to tithe them and return them to the seller, as he would then lower their monetary value. How should he proceed? He should tithe the produce, give the tithes to an appropriate recipient, and give the seller money in exchange for the tithes that he separated from it. Atu mishum digon belibo leknos, kana v'nischaya b'maaser. Amar Yehoshua, Chaber Shemayim Askinan Kekoyin Rav Sofer Zekayim Menavshe V'dovarem Es Bilvavo. The Gemara asks, is that to say that because one determined to buy the produce, even though he says nothing and performs no act of acquisition, he acquires the produce and becomes obligated in tithes? Rav Yehoshua said, here we are dealing with a buyer who is God-fearing, such as Rav Sofer, who himself fulfilled the verse and speaks truth in his heart. Psalms 15 verse 2. With regard to business matters, Rav Sofer considered himself bound by his thoughts at the time of negotiations, even if he did not express them verbally or perform any action. See Makot 24a. A person on the ethical level of Rav Sofer acquires the produce and becomes obligated to separate tithes from the moment that he decides to buy it. So I guess the only accountability he has to hold is just to himself, or any person who holds to that level of accountability of holiness. That's standard. Mishnah says, Hasiton Makane. It's a new Mishnah. Okay, that was the end of that. New Mishnah. Hasiton Makanach Midotav Achar Echad L'Shloshim Yom Ubar Bayit Echad L'Shnayim Asur Chodesh. Rab Shimon ben Gamliel Oimer Chilu Fadvorim. A wholesaler must clean his measuring vessels, which are used for measuring liquids such as oil and wine, once every 30 days, because the residue of the liquid sticks to the measure and reduces its capacity. And a homeowner who sells his goods must clean his measuring vessels only once every 12 months. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel says the matters are reversed. In the case of one who is constantly using his vessels for selling merchandise, the residue does not adhere to the measuring vessel, and therefore the wholesaler must clean his measures only once a year. But in the case of a homeowner who does not sell as often, the residue adheres to the measuring vessel, therefore he must clean it every 30 days. Chen v'ni mekaneach midotav pa'amim b'Shabbat. וממחה משקלותיו פעם אחת בשבת ומקנח מאזניים על כל משקל למשקל. אמר רבי שמעון בן גמליאל, במה דברים אמורים? בלח אבל ביבש אינו צריך. A storekeeper who constantly sells merchandise in small quantities cleans his measuring vessels twice a week and cleans his weights once a week. And he cleans the pans of his scales after each and every weighing to ensure that no merchandise has adhered to the pans, thereby increasing their weight. Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel said, in what case is the statement that it is necessary to clean a measuring vessel said, with regard to moist items, which are likely to adhere to the measuring vessels, but with regard to dry goods, which do not adhere to the measuring vessels, one does not need to clean his measuring vessels.